Jennifer Barrett is the Chief Education Officer at Acorns, a saving and investing app with over 9 million users. Through her TEDx talk and former media roles, including personal finance editor at CNBC, Jennifer is an expert at helping women shift their money mindsets and take control of their finances. She is also the author of Think Like a Breadwinner, a manifesto for the working woman with tips on building wealth and finding balance. Jennifer, we are so excited to have you with us today.
I am so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Could you tell us about your money story, your own personal money journey? We love to ask our guests this question at the start.
Sure. Well, I think I learned a lot of money lessons the hard way. And as you probably noticed when you were reading the book, I share a lot of them. But I really had my wake-up call as a young mom, early 30s. And at that time I had a great job. I was an editor at Newsweek. And I thought I was doing okay financially. I was covering half the bills and the rent. I had a little 401k and a little bit of savings. I was paying off my credit card debt. And then one night I was up with our youngest, who was then a toddler, about 18 months old. And I was just pacing back and forth in our bedroom, trying to get him back to sleep. And I looked around and we were in this tiny 1-bedroom apartment. And I think it just hit me in that moment that he was outgrowing his crib. We were outgrowing our apartment. We were in an unsustainable situation. And it was a real moment of reckoning for me, because I realized that I hadn't really been taking the steps to ensure that we could afford to have another child, which we both badly wanted, or to be able to buy a place of our own, or even to rent a bigger apartment in New York City, which is where we wanted to stay. And so I had to ask myself, what were the assumptions that were informing the choices I made with my money that had me not saving and investing for these goals that really were so important to me? And I realized that subconsciously I had really been depending on my husband to take the lead financially for our future, just as my own dad had. He was the sole or primary breadwinner for much of my childhood. And it wasn't even conscious. It was just this assumption that he would really be taking the lead there. And so I realized, the risk of that is that you depend on someone else for the things you really want in your future. And I didn't want to be in that vulnerable position. And I also wanted to be a better partner and be more involved in our finances. And so as I was kind of looking back at what the assumptions were that drove my choices, I asked myself, what if I had been raised to be a breadwinner? What if I had been raised to believe I would be fully financially responsible for myself for life, and probably a family too? Would that change the choices that I made with my money? And the answer was a resounding yes. And so I started to look at my money from a different perspective, as someone who could be a provider, as someone who had a lot more say and control in the kinds of choices I made with my money, and what that would mean for our future. And it just completely transformed my relationship with money and set me off on an entirely new trajectory, that eventually had me step into the main breadwinner role for our family, where I've been now for about 12 years. But it's been an incredible experience. And that was really the genesis of this book, was sharing that experience and then talking to over 100 other women about their experiences, some as breadwinners, some not, and really sharing their lessons and insights, as well as, a lot of the research that I did for the book.
And Jennifer, we're so excited to talk about your book today. But your story is not uncommon, right? Like
No.
most women, especially breadwinning women, never actually expected to step into that role and hold that kind of responsibility. And you said that you have been the primary breadwinner in your household for 12 years now. So has your responsibility changed with taking on that role? Or what is the responsibility, I guess, being the provider for your family?
Yeah, I think initially I didn't see it as, I'm going to step into the role of main provider and this is my new identity, right? I think I was a little tentative, like a lot of women, because I really hadn't been raised to think of myself as a breadwinner or a wealth builder or all of these things that kind of come along with being a provider and truly providing, for yourself, your family, your future. And so when I first stepped into the role, I think I was telling myself, this is temporary. I'm just going to earn this money and I'm going to invest some of it and save it so that we can buy this house and have another child and not be worried about this. But then I started to find my sea legs, I think, a little in the role and began to realize the benefits of thinking like a breadwinner. Whether or not you are the main earner at that particular point, I think it really comes down to this mindset of asking yourself, what do I want in my life? And what are the money and career choices I need to make to support that life? It gives you really more of a sense of agency, and it vastly expanded the way I looked at my own capabilities and the possibilities for my life. And so that was really the kind of the life-changing magic of the breadwinning mindset, was just feeling so much more confident and so much more agency over my life. And then, as you mentioned, a lot of women kind of step into that role by chance, not choice. And I think initially I did kind of step in without fully inhabiting the role. And I was a new mom too. I was pregnant with our second son when I became the breadwinner. So I think I had to work through a lot of the stories I had in my head about what it meant to be a good mom, right? Like, what were my caregiving responsibilities and how was I going to reconcile that with my increased breadwinning responsibilities and the demands of my job? And I will say it was pretty messy. I think the first few years I had a lot of resentments and fears and concerns about my ability to really step into this role and be a really good provider, and taking on what I felt like was the additional responsibility of investing really smartly for our future goals too. But, after those initial years and a lot of conversations with my husband about, what this meant and not having a roadmap, but really trying to figure out what worked for us, I really began to experience the benefits of being in that role, and came to a place where I think both my husband and I get to more fully experience both the caregiving and the breadwinning aspects of being parents to two children. And so that's been really incredible.
Jennifer, your book has come at a perfect time. So I'm living where you were, I think, I don't know how many years ago it was, but I have off the back of COVID, somewhat found myself in your exact shoes. So your book has just arrived at the perfect time in my life. I have shifted into primary breadwinner, even though my husband and I over time have taken turns when I was finishing my master's, right? Like sometimes it kind of comes in waves and comes and goes. But off the back of COVID, there were changes in my husband's organization. We had our kids at home. There was a lot going on. And we were seeing just a general, like, I would say a mental health reckoning with both of us trying to be everything and do everything. And I remember at the time he was really unhappy at work, whereas I was just like standard, like, okay, this is hard, but I can do difficult things. Like we were in very different headspaces. And I remember saying, now is the time for you to take the break, figure out what you need to do because of COVID. To me, it's like we can use COVID as this opportunity to reinvent what we're doing. And for the last, I think 6 or 7 months now, I've been in that role, and he's doing a lot of reevaluation of his priorities and his goals. And I have seen such a shift too in how he's been with our kids, somewhat even to the point, and I'm now pregnant with our third, and, things. And he'll, I'm seeing just such a shift as well in terms of what we're doing for our future together, right? Like we're rewriting that future. And I wouldn't say either of us was doing more or less before. I didn't feel like I was shouldering more of the parental burdens, but my kids are benefiting from him being and absorbing that role and owning it. Even if it is going to be temporary, we still don't know exactly how it's going to play out. I see my kids as the direct beneficiary of that. And, I think that is making me feel, to your point, a little bit more confident about if this is going to be the full-time distribution of, bringing in wealth, we can make it work. And I thank you for sharing that journey, because it's so powerful. And because many of us weren't taught that. So, we still live in a very heteronormative culture, right? It makes girls assume that we're going to grow up to get married to a man who will take care of things. First of all, it's a lot of unnecessary and unfair pressure on men, not to sit here and defend that, but it is actually unfair because I see that my husband has over time kind of rejected that too. But it's also crippling women, right? Like it's
Yes.
stopping us from kind of stepping into that power.
Yes.
And could you share a little bit more, maybe from your interviews that you had in prep for your book? When you were writing your book on that crippling effect on women in particular.
Sure, of course. And wow, there's a lot to unpack in what you just shared. And thank you for sharing all that. Yes, I think I did want to just touch on one thing that you said that I think is so important, is that we do damage to both genders. I think we limit both genders when we pigeonhole men in the breadwinning role and women in the caregiving role. When there is so much benefit to allowing both genders, both people in a partnership, whether it's same sex or hetero, to be able to fully experience both of those things. There's so much research around the benefits of fathers being more involved in the caregiving and having that time to bond with their children and providing that role model for their kids, and so much research showing the benefits of working moms and I think at this point, and this is relatively new, I think that we are starting to see a lot more research that shows that it is really the quality of the time that we spend with our kids that's more important than the quantity. So really we can give ourselves a bit of a break as moms and dads. If we're trying to juggle multiple responsibilities and be with our kids, it's really about making the most of the time that we have with them. I think that's wonderful that you guys are getting to experience all of this. And I do think that this is really the model for the future, that it will be more fluid, that you're not going to have one partner constantly in one role shouldering most of the responsibilities of, caregiving or breadwinning, while the other one shoulders most of the other responsibilities, or even just household responsibilities if you don't have kids. I think we're moving to a place where we're recognizing the benefits of allowing some more fluidity there so both partners can experience those things. And as you mentioned, by you stepping into this role and being in a place where I think you probably already had a breadwinning mindset and were doing okay and making, smart financial decisions, you were in a place to be able to say to your partner, you know what? Take this time to reevaluate. I mean, what a gift you've given him. It's incredible. So I just want to take a minute to acknowledge that. But
Things might be the hormones. I'm getting emotional now.
But it really is a gift. I mean, how often are we in a situation with a partner, and that is really being like a true partner, where you are in a position to say, you are really unhappy in your job and I'm doing okay. And we are okay if you step back and have that space to think about what you want to do next. That is a gift. It really is. So want to acknowledge that. But to your broader point, it is true that even though, we've seen this paradigm shift with a record number of women moving into the main breadwinning role in couples and in households with kids, culturally, I think we have not evolved to meet that reality yet. So we know that most men are still being brought up to believe that they will be financially responsible for themselves for life and probably a family. And most women are still culturally conditioned not to think of ourselves as breadwinners. And as I was doing the research for this book, it became really clear how those two very deep-seated beliefs inform so many of the choices that we make. So you see, for example, that men still disproportionately tend to select the highest paying majors and the highest paying occupations. Obviously, there are exceptions. If you're management consultants, you are in one of those roles too. But I think those are still the exceptions for most women if you take a step back and just look at the overall data. And even within high paying fields, Georgetown University has done a ton of research on this. They found that women pick the lowest paying tracks even when they pick the higher paying majors like law, business, all of those. And so that's one way it plays out, is that you see this sort of a disconnect between well, I wouldn't say disconnect. I think it's that you see women looking at their career still as, what am I good at? What do I enjoy? What will I find fulfillment doing? And the financial piece of that is often not part of the equation initially, whereas for men, they are thinking often very much around, okay, I want these things in my life. What job can I get that provides the income that will help me support these things that I want in my life? It's just a very different way of looking at career planning. And I think there's a way to marry both, right? To find something that you enjoy doing and can get paid for. But it is very important to ask the question of, how much will this job, this career pay? And will it actually be enough to support the life that I want? And that's the piece that's often missing for women. We also see that men invest more than women do, and they have significantly more wealth. So we know single women on average have 32 cents of wealth for every dollar that a white man has. And that is a huge gap that really we need to work to close as well. But I do think, the good news is that we can, whether we were raised to think of ourselves as breadwinners or wealth builders, doesn't matter in the big scheme of things, because we do have the ability to shift our mindset and start thinking that way, to overcome some of those messages and underlying beliefs that may be informing our money choices in a way that don't really serve us. But at first, we have to become aware of that, really become aware of the cultural messaging that we get that really still says women's income is not as important. Wealth building is not for women. Follow your passion and maybe the pay will follow. All of these messages that we still get as women, or that being taken care of means being taken care of financially. All these things. This is not just parents, although we know there's a lot of research showing parents speak differently to their girls and to their boys about money, and kind of reinforce those beliefs, talking to their girls about budgeting and spending smartly, and to their boys about building credit and building wealth. So it kind of starts there, but culturally, we continue to reinforce those messages. And so the first thing to do is to really be aware of all that messaging that you've absorbed, and then ask yourself, is it serving me? And what beliefs would serve me better if I really want to be able to provide the life that I want for myself without needing to depend on someone else for that?
I think this is so important, because I feel like we don't actually talk about this part a lot, where it's like you check out of your career before you've even had a career. I know in high school, I was really good at math and I really liked math. And I remember when I was having the college conversation with my parents, I was like, well, I guess I need to be a math teacher. And like, that's the only thing I can think of. And that has to do with math and numbers. And I think it might've been my mom, my dad, I don't know who said it, but they were like, you can go into finance, and finance has numbers. And I didn't even consider it. And then I remember then even in college saying to a professor, well, I do want to have a family someday. So I can't be an investment banker because that's doesn't allow me to have a family. And they were like, well, there's so many other jobs. You don't have to give up what you like and what you're good at because you're checking out. I haven't even started my job yet and I'm already making these decisions. I'm just glad that I had people along the way being like, don't feel like you have to pigeonhole yourself just because you have these goals in mind later on, and see where you end up. So I really appreciate you saying that, because I think that is a piece of the puzzle that is kind of missing here. And I also want to talk about, you and Catherine have both mentioned the messages that we get that men are the provider. And I feel like on top of that, we also hear oh, you want to have an equal partnership, and equal partnership is really important. But I just so happened to have a partner that had the same job as me. So our salaries were pretty much closely aligned, but most people don't. So if you are a teacher and you're marrying an accountant, your salaries are going to be different. And so you can still have a breadwinner mindset, even if you don't make the same, right? Yes. So it's more about being intentional and making the choices to pursue wealth. And I think you brought that up with having a wealth mindset, right?
100%. The breadwinning mindset, the distinction is that the breadwinning mindset is not conditional. Whether you're the main earner is conditional. You could be the breadwinner in the traditional sense of earning more today and lose your job tomorrow. But the mindset doesn't need to go away. And I think that is such an important point. Because whether you're a teacher or an investment banker, it really is about thinking about how to use every paycheck you get to start building wealth, thinking about how you can plan your career strategically, make the kinds of money choices that will empower you, that will give you choices in the future. And sure, there are additional barriers if you are, if you choose a career that pays less. But I think going into a career like that with eyes wide open and understanding that and saying, look, I was a journalist. I mean, I made so little in my first job that I qualified for food stamps. Now, I never had that conversation in college, and I'm Gen X, so I think that's shifting a little bit for, I'm almost a millennial, but I think it's shifting a lot, especially for younger millennials, that is part of the conversation more often. Literally not a part of the conversation. I knew from the time I was 13, I wanted to be a journalist, had so many conversations with my parents, my advisors, so many adults. Not one of them mentioned, you should be aware you're not going to make a lot of money. At least at first, no one even brought up the pay. And so I blithely went into this first job. And when they made me the offer and I realized what I was going to be paid, that was the moment I realized, oh my God, what have I signed up for? And I think in that moment, the first thing that's offered to you often, and this is changing a little bit, I think we have more awareness, but if you look at credit card debt, I'm not entirely convinced that we've made the shift there. Credit cards are then offered to you as, oh, this is the way to actually close the gap. You can still earn very little in this job that you are passionate about, but use your credit cards to afford the things that you want right now, and you'll catch up. You'll earn more in your career. And that was real. And I bought that like hook, line, and sinker for about a year until I got myself in a lot of trouble and thought, this is actually not working. And so maxed out my credit cards. And then I said, I love my job. So then you have a choice. If you're really passionate about what you're doing, do you quit your job and move into something you're less passionate about that pays more? And I really felt that. And I thought, no, I am so committed to this job. I love this particular job so much. I'm going to get a second job. And that is a choice sometimes that you have to make if you're being realistic. If you're thinking like a breadwinner, I got a second job, I paid off my credit card debt, and I started budgeting, and I was much more careful about how I spent my money. But the distinction there is that you are realistic about, this is the life that I want, and this is what it's going to cost, and there's a disconnect between that and what I'm actually going to earn doing what I love. So what are my options? I can take on a second job. I can be creative. As a teacher, you can teach summer school, you can tutor. There are other ways to bring in extra income, take a side job, but you have to be aware, like come in with your eyes open and say, I'm not just going to hope it magically works itself out. No, I need a plan. I need a plan so that I'm not getting myself into debt, or I'm not getting myself in a position where I'm really vulnerable financially, because that's the worst place to be. And there are so many creative solutions too. As you mentioned, if you love math, doesn't mean you have to be a math teacher. It doesn't mean you have to be an investment banker. I was just, when you were talking, I was actually thinking about my good friend whose son loves math. And he just got hired to do quant at a hedge fund, making more than probably all of us on this Zoom call. Oh, yeah. So I'm just saying, like, it wasn't that he said, I'm going to go work at a hedge fund. It took him a little while.
Career Day didn't set us up for success. I don't think they gave us like 10 options on Career Day. There was not like thousands and thousands.
Exactly. But we've come a very long way from our parents' generation, who, I kid you not, they were given tests to tell them which careers they should pick. And for the women, it was limited to like nurse, secretary, teacher.
Yep. Yes. We have come a long way.
Yeah. So there were no other options
into those categories.
But I think it's important. I think, to your point, it's really important to remember that you can do what you love in a variety of ways. I work at a fintech company. I'm not a journalist anymore, but I satisfy a lot of what really fulfilled me as a journalist and the role that I'm in now. So it's really like kind of stepping back and thinking, this is what I love. This is what I want to earn. How do I marry these two? How do I do that in a way that feels good to me and will allow me to feel fulfilled, and also allows me to support the life that I really want.
Jennifer, I think the messaging piece is so important. And of course, as a journalist, you are very good with words. So you know the importance of choosing the right words. We saw 90% of money articles aimed at women focus on spending less versus 72% of money articles aimed at men focus on investing and building wealth. Yes. How do we change this conversation?
Please. Please. What's so interesting is that, so that was the CEO of Starling Bank, who's a woman. She's pretty amazing, who commissioned this study. And it was not just UK media, though, it was across the board. So I think it is really relevant here. And it was not very long ago. We're talking like 2 years ago. So this is still happening. It makes me crazy. And when I was actually looking at the headlines, if you pick up an Esquire magazine or GQ or anything that's sort of aimed specifically at men, it's like how to build $1 million before retirement, the best stocks to invest in, watches and cars that will increase in value, all of these things. It's really, the mindset is, where can you put your money so it can grow the most and you can really build wealth? Whereas not all, there are exceptions, but many women's magazines are still about investment handbags. It drives me crazy because
the shame spiral of overspending.
Yes,
it's toxic.
It's disempowering. It's disempowering, but it's also like equating. So often what we do for women is equating saving with spending. So it's like saving for a spa getaway, saving for, a new dress that's expensive or a new handbag. And when we talk about investing, we talk about it like invest in a handbag, invest in a fashion piece. It's so limiting. And I see that and I think, if you invested the money in the S&P 500 index instead, you could buy yourself a whole closet full of shoes, in 5 years or 10 years. That's real power. That's real wealth. That's what allows you to have true spending power, right? It's not investing in something that may or may not increase, marginally in value. It's we misuse those words a lot when we're talking to women about money. And the other thing we talk about a lot with women is save, right? And save a little for a rainy day and save for retirement. We don't talk about investing for midterm goals. That's so important. And I think a big part of that is that we are still conditioned to believe like the man is going to buy the house, the man is going to earn the money so that we can have the kid and we're going to step back from our career. The man is going to, do the investing for our future, all of these things. Not true for millions of women. Just not true. And so disempowering either way. If you left college thinking, I want to buy a house one day, I want to start a family and maybe I'll do it with a partner. Or if I don't meet the right partner, maybe I'll do it myself. If you were thinking that way, you would be thinking, I need to build my credit because I'm going to have to get a mortgage one day to buy this home. You would not be thinking about how can I use credit cards to get whatever I want right now, even if I can't afford it, because that racking up credit card debt will ding your credit, will make it that much harder to build good credit, will make it that much harder to get a mortgage. It's a completely different way of looking at credit, of looking at savings. You're not going to leave all your money in a savings account earning in a high yield account 0.5%. That's nothing. Most accounts right now are paying 0.05%. That's like a nickel for every $100. It's nothing. You're not going to leave all your money there if you're thinking like a breadwinner, because you're like, my money's not even growing as fast as inflation. It's losing value every year. You're going to put enough in there so that, okay, if you need your money right away, it's there. And then you're going to invest the rest so that you can start growing it. It's a completely different way of looking at every aspect of your finances and your life, by the way, because they're connected.
So Jennifer, I love this. I just think the article thing, it's just like, there's all these things firing in front of my head right now, but I'm picturing, every film we've seen where the young professional moves to New York City. It's always New York City. It's always like the doorman building, Upper West Side, right? And they're like, and I work in a magazine. You're like, okay, in real life, they would be making $37,000 a year.
Yes.
Like,
you would not be in a doorman building.
You would not be in a doorman building. I know that. I lived in New York for a while. You also like Carrie Bradshaw, look at those shoes, right? And we all laugh at it, but then it does. It's like, how do you, I don't know how you like separate the entertainment from the messaging, right? And I know that
I wish the Carrie Bradshaw thing cracks me up because they focus on her buying shoes. They should be focusing on the fact that she needs a mortgage for that closet.
Oh, that's it. Well, there is that episode where she realizes she can't buy a place because she spent all her money on shoes. And I was like, all right, one lesson in, 45 episodes.
7 years.
Right?
Yeah.
And then Big writes a check and all right. And there's this whole, do I take his money or not? I'm like, that is not real life, that someone is just going to write you a check when you spent too much on shoes so you can buy an apartment, please.
I know. And yet I still on a sick day love to put that show on. And
I know. No. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with watching it and being entertained by it. It's just like disentangling those messages from reality, because, really at one point she was incredibly dependent on Big. She was vulnerable. She really was. And I wish that the film or the movie and the TV show had gotten into that a little bit more about what that feels like when you realize, oh my God, the choices that I've made have set me up to be dependent on someone else, have set me up to be so vulnerable. And that's a terrible feeling. And I wish that they had stayed with that a little bit, because that would have been a really powerful lesson.
I know, right? Well, there's always sequels coming up and rumors. So maybe we should just
Kim
recommend.
Cattrall is going to be a part of that.
No, she will not, but we will recommend it to them.
Exactly.
Now, you talk, obviously the title of your book is Think Like a Breadwinner. Mm-hmm. How much of this is mentality versus the staggering lack of financial literacy and formal education that we do not receive in our upbringing, both maybe at home, but also in our schooling. And we've talked about this, we've shared our own examples so many times on the show and with various guests that we were, highly educated. I mean, I have a master's degree and I still had debt, right? And I took on debt to get educated because I thought that was good debt. And, there might've been credit cards. And there's all these things that we, as successful, educated, professional women, have achieved, but we're missing a chunk there. So where do you think mentality leaves off, literacy picks up? What's the interplay there? And I know it's a really challenging question because it's very convoluted, but
no, I mean, it is complex, but they are connected. And I do think when you shift your mindset and you start asking those questions, then you have that sort of motivation to go and find the answers. And the answers are out there, but not always easy to find. And again, you are coming up against a lot of messaging that is saying, you don't need to invest. Wealth building is not for you. Don't, it's selfish or greedy if you want to make a lot of money, all of these things. So you're bumping up against this cultural messaging at the same time that you're trying to educate yourself on how to improve your finances. So it is tricky. And we do, let's be clear. And I think you guys have said this many times on your podcast, we are doing a terrible job at financial literacy in this country. It is shameful. It is shameful. 6 states require a standalone personal finance course. 6. You got 15 that require some coursework on personal finance be integrated somewhere in the curriculum. That is so inadequate for the vast majority of Americans, because the vast majority of Americans do not have parents that are sitting down with them and talking about all these things. I had 2 parents who were accounting professors when I was a kid. They did not sit down with me and say, this is actually what it costs to live in New York, which is where I moved. And this is the kind of salary that you're going to need in order to kind of have the lifestyle that it sounds like you want. This is what happens when you get into credit card debt and how compounding works against you. And this is what happens if you invest your money and how compounding works for you. We did not have those conversations. And it's not that they are incredibly intelligent. They are both, by the way, fantastic investors. And my mom and I now have those conversations on a regular basis about what we're investing in. But I don't think that they realized how critical those skills and that messaging would be for us. And many parents don't. And then schools are not filling in the gaps. And I don't blame the schools. I think as a country, this needs to be a requirement. I mean, it just has to be a requirement. Everyone seems to agree on this, but we're not doing it. So I think in the meantime, you have to fill in those gaps on your own. And there are this podcast is great. There are so many great podcasts out there. There are so many great resources. Acorns has a lot of resources. I am in love with Zogo, this app that is doing everything I really wanted to do in Acorns and haven't been able to do yet. It requires a bit of resources, but their app is fantastic as a way to just kind of gamify financial literacy. So I think they're out there, but I agree with you. Like we need to be doing a better job of educating everyone, boys and girls, and then really thinking about the messages that we are sending to both genders around their responsibilities and their roles and their capabilities in the world, and the impact that can have on the choices they make.
I think it's just so important. And I do think that it's starting to change. I think, like you said, like the younger and younger generations, they're starting to ask these questions because no one has asked these questions. So even if I didn't have parents who are accountants, if I had asked them what to invest, I don't even think right now they know the answer to that. But I think more and more people are getting comfortable asking or pursuing the answers. But I totally agree that just the formal education system is a complete shame and
well, the
area
other
of lack.
thing, yeah.
Do you ever
I
feel like
agree.
it's kind of by design? I know this is so cynical, but part of me is like, okay, if we distract everybody by the debt that they need to pay off, like if we bring people up the schooling ladder and tell them college is the way that you're going to be successful, and without it, you won't be anything. And so all these people just saddle themselves with a bunch of student loan debt. And then you get into the workforce and you're not making that much money. So you do fill in the gap, like you said, Jennifer, with the credit card. And then we keep carroting in front of them, like the carrot and stick approach. We keep holding this like, oh, the next promotion, the next. And people just continue to live and spend money they haven't even earned yet, which a lot of my friends do all the time. I see them. I'm getting a bonus in 3 months and I've already decided how I'm spending it. No one's ever talking about investing it. And, they're just, if everybody's distracted and trying to play catch up, I know this sounds so depressing. I'm sorry to do this on a Friday, but I kind of think it's by design. Because if you wanted people to, the man.
No, but really, like, think about who it serves. Credit card companies benefit from the messaging that you can close the gap between what you can afford and the life that you want or aspire to with credit cards. Boom. They make tons of money off of that. The financial services industry benefits from obfuscating what is actually quite a simple practice. Like, it is not hard to invest. It is quite simple. There, you can literally just invest in an S&P 500 index fund, ETF, Google it, put some money into it.
20 minutes.
If nothing else,
done.
If nothing else, you are now basically investing in the majority of the market, and the market, earns 7 to 10% per year on average. So if you do nothing else, that will benefit you greatly. That is literally like, you Google it, you open an account, boom, or you open an account at Acorns. I will say that because I work there. It's very easy. We actually create the portfolios for you. We're not the only ones doing this. It is super easy to invest these days. You don't need $1,000. We start with spare change, so that barrier is gone, but there is still this kind of reinforcement of the messaging that investing is so complex and managing your money is so complex that you need to pay somebody else to do it. And every time you get messages like this, I just would encourage your audience, and I 100% agree with you, ask who it serves. Does it serve you, or does it serve someone else? And who is that someone else? And be wary, right? Be wary. If you're telling people you have to go to college and it's okay to take on debt to do that because that is the bare minimum in order to get a decent paying job, who does that serve, right? Tuition is insane right now. It is completely detached from inflation. And the number of people with student debt right now is just insane. And they're carrying $35,000 on average. You're coming out the gate $35,000 in the hole. No wonder, we have normalized debt. No wonder people are like, I'm going to spend my bonus. Why invest it? I owe $35,000.
and I have 15 years to pay it off, and it might get forgiven. So I'm just going to wait and see. Right?
Exactly. It's that
everybody's just numb to numbers at this point.
Exactly. And that's
so
dangerous.
Big and so large and so scary it's like, we're just numb to that at all.
Well, what's another $1,000 in credit card debt if I owe $35,000 in student debt? But there is a difference. There is a distinction. You immediately, like student loan debt, yes, immediately get on a plan to pay that. Don't add to it. But you have to have someone saying to you, no, don't add to it. The $1,000, the bonus that you get, you could spend it now or you could invest it. And then when you pay off your student debt, you're not going to start at zero. You're going to start way ahead of that. Because I have a friend who just paid off his student debt. And he was like, it was so great to pay it off. And now I'm at zero. And I was like, oh, That's so demoralizing. There's no reason why
congrats.
you can't invest while you're paying off your student debt, because it is really depressing to work that hard just to get to the starting line again.
And I tell people all the time that when you do pay off your student loan debt, no one congratulates you. Sally Mae.
Yeah, but they don't.
You're expecting some like really exciting thing
you're
to happen,
like a band to show up at your door.
It is so anticlimactic. You're
Here's
like,
your certificate. You paid it off. It's true. It's true. And I do think in a lot of cases, it is worth it to make that investment in your education, but it is important to be questioning these things. Is it worth it? What is my major? What kind of job can I get with my major? What will it pay? How am I going to pay off my student loan debt? You don't want to take out more than, I think it was 10% of what, as a baseline, 10% of what you expect to earn. Is that right? That can't be right. Yeah. You don't want to take out more than 10% of what you expect to earn your first year out. That's not very much for most people. So when you do that math, it starts to change the equation. It starts to change the way you're thinking about these things. And it's important. It's important to be proactive and to be questioning these things. And I say, to your point, I don't think you're cynical. I think you're realistic. I think it's really empowering and important to ask, who benefits from this messaging? Because it's not me. So then what choices do I need to make that really do benefit me?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Now I'm like realizing if every guidance counselor in high school just had that one stat when they were helping you identify which colleges were a good fit, we could make such a difference.
I mean, Catherine and I have had so many conversations about how it's probably just wrong to even allow an 18-year-old to like pick what they want to do for the rest of their life. Like, luckily you knew you wanted to do journalism at 13.
I know, I'm an anomaly.
But so many people don't. And so many people are stuck in those buckets that we talked about earlier, the teacher, nurse, whatever. And it's like, okay, we need more time to figure out what we actually want to do before we start just like piling on the debt. But
completely agree.
Yeah. Cause time's money, right? While you're sitting in those college courses, figuring out what you want to do, it's literally racking up debt. Yeah. Wow. This has been so powerful, Jennifer. Now you're giving me all these ideas, Katie. I think we're gonna have to do some business planning on like how we tap into the high school world, right? Get them at 17.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's what happens every time we have these conversations. We're like, we need to start younger.
Yeah, we need to go to preschool.
I mean, luckily, like your third kid is listening to all of these conversations on the podcast,
absorbing it through the world.
Right there in the belly.
So we're starting early.
It is important to talk to your kids, and I do think kids. I mean, I have a 10 and a 14-year-old. They understand. I mean, I talk to them about the stock market all the time. We pick stocks, we watch them. Like I want them to have like a real understanding of what things cost and how much you have to save in order to, for example, buy the house that we're looking at next. Like these things don't just magically appear when you have a job. It requires
do you mind if I ask, do your kids know or have an idea that you might make more than your husband, or like, do they have a sense of what a breadwinner is in your family? Because I don't think I had that concept at all as a child. Like,
really?
At all. I think I just like truly thought things happened, and like, who knows where that comes from?
No, but they sort of do as a kid. You're like, and presto, we have a new house. You're not seeing all the,
But I definitely didn't think like, oh, I need to go to dad because dad makes the money, and therefore like,
I got you.
That's what I mean. More like that.
We are careful not to convey that. I think what my kids come to me for, which warms my heart, is that when Zachary saw everything that was happening, my oldest saw everything that was happening with GameStop. He was watching something on TikTok, and he came to me and said, "You're really smart about investing, right? Can you explain what's going on with GameStop?" And I was like, "Yes, please. Let me be that resource."
You're like, the plebs are storming the castle. They're taking over.
Right. I tried to make it a teachable moment. And I said, this would not be the time to invest now that you're seeing it on TikTok and it's like up at $400 a share, because I guarantee you by the end of this week, it is going to be down so much. And there are a bunch of people who are going to invest now and they're going to lose a lot of money. So, and we watched it and he was like, oh, yeah. So there are
teachable if you watch the whole week, not just that one day.
Yes. And I always say to them, don't just watch this one thing. People have a lot of FOMO and they invest in things that they don't understand. And a lot of people get burned. So I invest in a lot of boring things that, you know, just grow. And then I take a little money and I play with that. And that's probably the way you want to do it. So you can sleep at night and afford the mortgage and all those things. But no, they know that I'm not sure that they're clear on that. It's a really good question. They don't come to me and say like, Mom, can I have money? Because Dad doesn't, you know, like I'm coming to you or whatever for that. We don't have that kind of dynamic, but I do think that, I think they know that we both work hard, and I think they, you know, in a good way. I think we're role models in terms of, we're trying to be role models in terms of we're both really engaged with our kids, but also I make it really clear. I love what I do and I want to earn a lot of money doing it. I am 100% clear on that. And I tell them too.
And like, I think that's the model in general that is so important, is love what you do and get paid your worth for that.
Yes.
So,
and if you're not making enough doing what you love, then figure out how can you do some of what you love, or maybe all of what you love, doing something else that will bring you that money, enough money just to support the kind of life that you want and your family and whatever else, you know, you want to support, the causes, the candidates. There are so many things that we can do when we have money beyond our next paycheck.
Jennifer, I don't want to add to your plate, but at some point I feel like you need to take all these lessons for your kids and put them into a book, given you have that skill set already developed. So just let us know when
the children's book comes out.
When the children's book comes out.
That's a great idea. I do think about that a lot. Like, how do we, you know, it's great to be able to educate my 2 boys, but like, that's 2 boys and a sea of children. And I want all of them to be as well equipped. Yeah.
Same.
Well, at least Catherine and I are very lucky that we got to learn from your book. So thank you so much.
I feel
for
so
that.
fortunate.
It was quite a gift. So we typically end our episodes with a fun question. And I do just want to thank you again for all your time today. This has been such a great way to spend my Friday. But what is something that you will always splurge on versus something that you will always skimp on? So like my usual example, just to like give you an idea of what we're talking about, is I cannot, like, there's something about like a $4 delivery fee that I won't do. Like, I don't do delivery.
You're like my husband.
The stupid
he would
little
rather
$4
schlep.
Yeah, I'll walk 3 miles to go get sushi.
In a blizzard uphill without shoes.
Oh my God,
that's
you
Katie.
And my husband, you are.
Yeah, it's like really sad. But then I'll still get like the $50 worth of sushi. That's like totally ridiculous as well. So I feel like that's my skimp and splurge. And they don't have to be related, but we just like to get to know you on a personal level.
Sure. I mean, mine is probably, let's see, it may sound a little boring, but I will never skimp on health. So that's like, if there's a special, you know, my sister, she's okay now, but she had cancer. And I was like, I mean, she's doing fine financially, so she didn't really need this, but I was like, if you need to come up to New York and see, especially, you know, and I will pay for it, whatever it's, you know, like, just to be in a position to be able to do that for someone is amazing. And, you know, and also just to know that if someone is sick, that you can afford those things, because our healthcare system still has a lot of inequities in it. So I will always splurge on that. And I don't even think about it. But that also holds true with like yoga, or I'll buy organic food because I think it's, you know, or the Dirty Dozen, you know, whatever, where there is actually a difference if it's organic or not. I will splurge on those things. I will buy smoothies sometimes and not really think about it. But I will skimp. What will I skimp on? I will skimp on a lot. But it doesn't feel like skimping. I think it's just really a matter of your values, right?
Well, at some point it becomes habit, so you don't even notice it, right?
It's true. So I do most of my shop. I mean, I buy a lot of clothes on ThreadUp. Because they have incredible designer clothes and they have sales all the time, and the sales are like amazing. And so that's one way where I will spend money on clothes sometimes, but I also think, why would I not do this? Because, you know, like there's some instances where it just makes sense to me to buy something on sale. If it's, you know, I'm not chasing every trend anymore. So it doesn't matter to me whether I buy it in 3 months or 6 months, if it's something I plan to keep for a while. So why not buy it on sale? Yeah, I think that would be where Or
Those
I
are
skip
great
a
ones.
little.
I think actually the healthcare one is one that's
first time.
it's the first time we've gotten that. And
Yeah.
it makes so much sense because I do think that people think that way, but they don't usually think of that as a splurge. And I like that a lot.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that. You just kind of turn that question around on its head for us.
I like to do that.
Well, Jennifer, this has been such an amazing conversation. Again, we're very grateful for the generosity of your time today. Are there any parting words, anything that you would like us to share at the end before we close our conversation?
No, I just I think we covered so much territory, and this is such a joy to be able to talk about this, especially with other people who are so passionate about it. So I thank you for that, and reach out anytime. I mean, my website's jenniferbarrett.com. Someone reads the book and they have feedback, hit me up there or on social. I'm always glad to hear, what they got out of the book or questions they had after the book or anything like that. So please feel free.
And we're looking forward to promoting you as well when we go live with the episode too.
Thank you.
Exactly. Well,
This
thank
has
you
truly
again.
been so much fun. I love doing this, and especially I think you have great questions, and I love hearing about your own stories too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
you.